Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Had a Secret, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The Sandaime looked up from his paperwork at the polite, yet insistent, knock on his office door. Rubbing at his eyes, he took a small breath, before setting his pen aside for the moment. Come in. A moment later, the door opened, and he was greeted with the gray uniformed shinobi known as Izumo. Hokage-sama, I'm sorry for the interruption, but Kiyoshi-san and Kakashi-san are here. I wasn't sure who you wanted to see first. Sandaime hesitated. Kiyoshi did have an appointment, but Kakashi might have an important reason to see him. Sighing, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling in thought for several minutes before shifting his attention back to Izumo. Just send them both in, please. Yes, Hokage-sama, Izumo said, offering a polite bow before closing the door. A few moments later, the door reopened, allowing both Kakashi and Kiyoshi to enter. Kiyoshi-san, how nice to see you again, the Hokage said pleasantly, getting to his feet as he motioned the man to have a seat. Ah, Sandaime-sama, you are looking well, the doctor responded just as pleasantly and doing as he was bidden, selecting a rather comfortable chair to relax in. I take it this isn't a social call? Sandaime asked, moving to the bay windows, where he stared out at the village quietly. Sadly, no. I have Uzumaki-san's test results back. The man paused, then continued. Perhaps the news can wait for a bit, you seem rather tired. Exhausted is more like it, Sandaime admitted with a chuckle. The Chunin exam is a very trying situation, Kakashi offered, leaning against a wall near shelf of scrolls. Perhaps, but I'd like to schedule you for an appointment. You're the doctor. Waving a hand, the Hokage turned and resumed his seat while fixing the man with his gaze. Now, about Naruto's exam. Of course. You should know, first of all, that I had to give him a complete physical. Kiyoshi paused, scowling slightly as if annoyed by something. Uzumaki-san had one visit to the hospital about 6 years ago and was turned away. That's 6 years worth of missing medical history. I understand, Sandaime assured the doctor, wondering why doctors always hinted at money so slyly. We have funds for cases like Naruto's. I was just informing you of his previous medical history so you'd understand my surprise and shock, Kiyoshi responded before assuming an authoritative tone. I fully expected to see untreated and undiagnosed diseases, improperly set or healed bones. What I found. Hokage-sama, Uzumaki-san is in perfect health. And that's what inspired your shock and surprise? Kakashi questioned, sounding amused. Even Sandaime had to admit that, while impressive, what Kiyoshi had told him was hardly earth-shattering. Kiyoshi, however, shook his head, his tone growing even more serious. Hardly, though it is an impressive feat considering he has been without medical care for a large portion of his life. Then what was it? In all surface aspects, his body is normal, Kiyoshi said, lacing his fingers together. His immune system is much more efficient than anyone else's, and his metabolism is abnormally high, but his reflexes, hearing, sight and other basic functions are normal. When you say abnormally high, Sandaime prodded, leaning forward to rest his hands on the desk. I mean off the scale. Well, that would explain how Iruka-san can go broke buying him ramen, Kakashi said, humor in his tone. I guess we don't have to worry about Naruto ever getting drunk, either. That is interesting, Sandaime mused, leaning back in his chair. Not half as interesting as what else I discovered, Kiyoshi said, his tone actually growing excited. He heals at an impossible rate. I made a small incision on his finger for a B sample, and, when I went to place a bandage on it, the C had already nearly finished healing. Really? Kakashi said with a casualness that was a bit too casual to be legitimate. Sandaime, however, knew exactly what was going through the man's mind. It was a rather obvious thought. If such a healing ability could be harnessed for the ANBU, it would be invaluable. Of course, once word got out about this, then certain other groups within Konoha would want it as well. Sadly, the Sandaime could see no immediate solution to that situation. Yes, and not only that, Kiyoshi said, oblivious to the military thoughts running through the room. His body, once it heals, does so in a manner to prevent the same level of injury from occurring again. Wait, Sandime held a hand up, blinking slightly. Could you repeat that? I mean, Kiyoshi said slowly, as if trying to contain his excitement, that, not only does Uzumaki-san heal extremely quickly, but his body adjusts itself for the level of injury he receives. So, if I were to, say, break his fingers for stealing, Kakashi said slowly, his voice almost gleeful at the thought, he would heal in such a way that I would have to use more force to break them again. Yes, I believe so, Kiyoshi responded, staring at the masked man in consternation. Upon noticing the rapid healing of the finger, I examined the shoulder that Anko-san reported had been injured. It was fundamentally different from the rest of his body. The F was thicker, the muscle fibers tougher. But such rapid healing must have a drawback, Sandime said after a moment, unless Anko was correct in her theory. RB heal and grow by the process of cell reproduction, Kiyoshi explained, shifting his attention back to the Sandime. It's called cellular mitosis, and, over time, the cells accumulate too many mutations, to the point of apoptosis for them, and for ourselves. So, the faster and more rapidly a cell divides, the faster they approach death, Sandime summarized, then arched an eyebrow at the smirk on the doctor's face. I take it that Naruto's cells don't function that way. Oh, his cells divide and reproduce, Kiyoshi said smugly, but Uzumaki-san's cells don't mutate. They are perfect copies. Therefore, they never come any closer to apoptosis. So he does have an advanced bloodline, Sandime breathed in relief, sitting back in his chair. It does meet the criteria, Kiyoshi answered before rubbing at his leg nervously. However, there is no record of such an ability, thus no official name. I chose Tenkichiyu, as it seemed to fit best. I agree, Sandime said after a moment of consideration. I trust you'll agree to be his primary physician. I've already taken care of that. Besides, as it stands, unless Tsunadheim suddenly returns, I'm the only one remotely qualified to handle his medical care. Good, Sandime said, then, glancing at a suddenly anxious Kakashi, sat up. If there is nothing else. Actually, Kiyoshi said, leaning forward as well, there is one last thing. I know it's not normally part of an A1 level exam, but I ordered a hereditary test for him. What did you find? Sandime asked, his instincts on edge. Had they, by examining him, found a living relative? Was Naruto not an orphan after all, and merely an abandoned child? First, please remember that most of the medical records from the incident 12 years ago were destroyed, Kiyoshi said, as if hedging for time. I can't tell you who his mother is, specifically, but I can tell you that he seems to be distantly related to the Inuzuka, and one other person. How distant? Sandime suddenly snapped, eyes growing hard. Distant enough that the Inuzuka clan would have no way of knowing, Kiyoshi explained. Hokage-sama, I think his other relative could be more important. Frowning, the Sandime sat back in his seat, reaching up to cover his mouth in thought. If Kiyoshi thought the other relative was important, then he would accept that. This person is, well, he was out of his immediate family, though he did lack the Tenkichiyu. Define, immediate, Kakashi asked curiously. Immediate, as in he was the father. Kiyoshi said sounding amazed. Note, was, as in past tense. So, who is it? Sandime asked, propping his elbows on the desk and lacing his fingers together. He stared expectantly at the doctor, waiting, knowing that whatever was about to be said was going to make life a lot more difficult. Kiyoshi took a breath, as if what he was about to say was hard to admit. He closed his eyes for a moment then, opening them nodded. Yondaime-sama, Kiyoshi said, tone reverent. Uzumaki-san is the son the Yondaime Hokage. The Sandime remained perfectly still, as if frozen, and then, for all his dignity and extensive vocabulary, said the only word that his stunned mind could conceive of, F. Quote. Naruto, related to sensei. Kakashi half whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. Slumping, the Sandime lost himself in thought for several long minutes. He had noticed the similarities in appearance before, but had marked it off to his wishful thinking. There was the fact that the Yondaime had been found in the nursery of Chernobyl Hospital that night. It was so freaking obvious. Get Naruto in my office. This is. Kakashi didn't move for a moment and then his gaze turned ominous. Quote. Anko. What about her? Sandaime snapped. Kakashi, however, shook his head and turned, heading for the door. Nothing. Please excuse me. Then, not waiting for an answer, he was gone, the door behind him. Anko. MHHMM. The Jonin managed, not looking away from the village. Why didn't we just keep going? Naruto asked, shifting to look at her. Cause. Anko shrugged, finally glancing at him. We need to study the situation before we go rushing in. After all, we don't just have to worry about the villages. Those rice fields are important, too. Huh, they're just rice. Anko sighed and rolled her eyes, pointing at one of the fields being patrolled by a small group of genin. Fushimi isn't just a small village, they grow the highest quality rice in all of Hino Kuni. Which means they are very valuable to the economy, since their rice is used for everything from sacramental sake to the tatami in the daimyo's castle. Oh, Naruto blinked, then scratched the back of his head. So why'd Susan decide on this place? It doesn't seem like a good place. It's not, Anko allowed, turning her attention back to the village. Normally this type of village is avoided by people in his situation, but I'm guessing he chose this place for a reason. Probably thinks that as long as he can threaten the fields the samurai can't move against him. But what about, how most of the samurai are actually ninja? Susan is Anbu, Anko explained tiredly. To an Anbu, even most field-tested jonin aren't much of a challenge in one-on-one combat. So, samurai are almost a joke, especially considering that Susan specialized in combat operations. Combat. It means he specializes at controlling teams and creating stratagems, Anko snapped, glaring at him. Which means that he'll be expecting ninja. Naruto was silent at that, looking worried, and Anko relaxed, allowing her eyes to finish the scan of the perimeter. Satisfied that they had indeed selected the best entrance point, she smiled. Oi, what are you smiling about? Naruto suddenly asked, his tone edged with tension. Because Susan is not Kakashi, Anko answered, chortling. He's expecting a full team, not just 2 ninja. He set up his perimeter under that assumption. So, to quote Yondaime, attack where the enemy doesn't expect you. Anko smirked, shifting her weight on the branch as she sat down to watch the sunset. See, this road runs directly past the rice fields, and it has 2 teams, one at the entrance and one in the fields. But, if they have 2 teams, aren't they expecting something there? Not really, Anko said, waving a hand dismissively. After all, this is main entrance to the village, nobody in their right mind would attempt to enter the village this way. You'd be spotted before you'd gotten near the walls, but because it's so obvious, you don't need good ninja there. Just ones that can see. Since Susan's forces are limited, he's probably put his weakest and least talented genin here, to deter samurai and others away by a show of force. Right. Naruto sitting down next to her. So, while the stronger teams are guarding the other least likely entrances, this is the obvious choice. Anko explained, beginning to clean one of her nails absently. It means he's honestly not expecting anyone to attempt to come in through the front door. After all, it's common sense to enter through a back or side door. How is that obvious? Naruto demanded, looking thoroughly confused. All combat is based on deception, Anko grinned, looking at him. In other words, think outside the box, Naruto said in comprehension before blinking. So, what if he knows you'll think he wants you to enter from the back door, but will enter from the front door? It could be a trap then, right? Oh yes, Anko nodded seriously. But it's not. See, Susan's real ground operation strength was offensive strategy. This is defensive strategy, and he's mediocre at best in that. Now, if this was Kakashi, I'd still be looking for a way in since he looks underneath the underneath. Oh, Naruto frowned. So, you're going in now? No, Anko grinned sweetly at him. I'll sneak past those 2 genin teams in the morning. Nighttime attacks are also a standard assumption. Okay, Naruto said, nodding in acceptance, and then fell silent before glancing at her. What if I attacked the far side of the village at the same time? So you're just going to walk up in full view and pick a fight with the strongest teams? Anko asked before chuckling, amused that he was showing some appetite for unique strategy. Well, that certainly is outside the box. Great. Pause. Quote. Anyway, miso ramen is better than seafood. Oi. And pork ramen is still pretty good, but some people say it's not that healthy, but it don't matter cause it tastes really. Naruto-kun, Anko see him off, her tone overly sweet. Turning to face him, she arched an eyebrow, quote. Good boy. Kakashi was not prone to rash action, it simply was not his nature, which was why when he first learned of Anko's decision in recruiting Naruto for her mission he had kept from sending teams after her. Instead he had decided to wait and speak with the Hokage, mainly because Naruto was one of only 2 rookie genin that Kakashi could see surviving this mission, and secondly because there was information about unity he needed to share. Sadly this was before he had discovered the connection between his sensei and the blonde prick that had stolen his precious. Now he was doing something extremely rash, not to mention dangerous. 3 days worth of travel, condensed into only a few hours, it should have been impossible. Technically it was, the Yondaime had managed it, but that was because he was the single most powerful ninja to have ever lived. He had a jutsu specially designed for such a task. All Kakashi had was his genuis, large chakra capacity and AD ranked jutsu. The Shunshin no Jutsu, which was most certainly never intended for prolonged use or traveling such huge distances. It was designed for short trips, quick escapes and little else. Of course, being the genuis that he was, Kakashi had of course, figured out the loopholes and used it as he pleased. The Shunshin no Jutsu balanced distance and elevation to chakra, so the further the distance and elevation the more chakra required. Kakashi had judged that the safest distance would be no more than 100 feet at a time, which was proving more or less accurate. Landing on a branch after his latest Shunshin, he paused, hand pressed against the rough bark while he recovered for a moment. Body protesting, he looked up at the sky, pondering the only question that was really worth bothering with at this point. Why had nobody ever realized Naruto's relationship to the Yondaime? It could be possible for the village at large to be ignorant of the Yondaime's connection to Naruto, it could also be possible that the Yondaime had even hid it from the Sandaime for obvious concerns. Still, that shouldn't have kept Jiraiya from saying something. Jiraiya, the one man who should have known, had acted as ignorant as anyone else. That was the real mystery, so far as Kakashi was concerned. If you knew that your most prized and beloved student had family, and that that family was now completely alone, it would only make sense that you see to their welfare. You would, at the very least, keep tabs on them. Yet, Jiraiya, who had to have known, pretended that the Yondaime was the last of his family. Kakashi supposed it was possible that because of the time frame of his departure, Jiraiya could have been ignorant. Kakashi doubted that, however, and taking a moment longer he mulled over his memories, trying to glean any clues to the Sanin's actions. Finding nothing, Kakashi shrugged and prepared to move once more, when a half-forgotten memory rose to the surface. It was, at first glance, a very superficial memory of a conversation between nurses shortly after the Yondaime's funeral. Yet, they had mentioned 2 key elements: 1, that Jiraiya had visited the nursery before leaving the village, and 2, he had muttered that it was for the best. Which meant that, whatever reason Jiraiya had for not revealing Naruto's relationship was for the best. The best for whom or what was unclear. Could he have known about unity and the goals even then? Or was it something else? It was possible, Kakashi conceded, that Naruto could have been targeted by the Yondaime's old enemies. But the Hokage would never have allowed anything to happen to the child. Hell, if it had been known, Naruto would have been adopted almost immediately, Stimga or not. So just what was the legendary ninja's reasoning behind keeping the family connection quiet? Then of course came a question he dreaded, until they knew why Jiraiya had covered it up, should Naruto even be told? Which would be crueler, Kakashi wondered silently, knowing or not knowing. Shaking his head he set those thoughts aside, realizing that he was wasting time, and then with a burst of chakra and concentration he was moving once more. All that really mattered, Kakashi supposed as he passed yet another 100 feet and prepared for a nearly instantaneous continuation, was that he ensured Naruto's safety. After all, no matter the crime of stealing his precious book and giving it to that woman, Kakashi was honor bound to keep his sensei's son alive. Taking a deep breath, he concentrated and then, faster than a heartbeat, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Slipping unnoticed into the village, past the genin, Anko wondered at the sheer simplicity of Susan's defense. Even if he was mediocre, he should have had a better understanding concerning defensive than just a handful of genin. There should have been traps at the very least, But instead she was able to almost brazenly walk through the front gate with the early morning sun. Hell, she probably didn't even need the Maisai now that she was actually in the village. Not that she was going to stop using it. After all, if it was so simple to enter the village, there had to be something she didn't know about. So, she made sure to keep an eye on the disgruntled villagers and anything that seemed out of place. Still, there was nothing to even suggest that this village was better guarded than she had first thought. Frowning, she decided that it was time to hit the best place to gather information, which meant ducking into an alley so that she could release her Maisai and henge herself into an unassuming female. That done, she stepped back out in the streets, blending into the crowd as she began her hunt for a bar. That proved more difficult than expected. This place seemed to have a lot of taverns for such a small village, but nothing like what she needed. Still, every village had the type of bar where the lowest of the low hung out and nobody was particularly interested in who came and went. Eventually, she found such a place and, when she entered, it was indeed the type of dive she had been looking for. The lights were dim, the air stale with tobacco and spilt beer, and nobody bothered looking up when she entered. Satisfied, she slipped past the tables to the dirty bar, where she was greeted by the bartender, who gave her a rather lecherous smile. Anko dismissed that, however, more intent on the hand that her training told her was on its way toward her. Now, she could have reacted like Kurenai would have grabbed the hand and broken it, or she could ignore it, which is exactly what she did. Which resulted in an expected dark glare from a common village girl. Never mind that she wanted to break his end, then she turned her attention from the amused drunken face the bartender. So, what can I get you, pretty lady? Giving an even more loathsome glare to the bartender, she s her money on the counter. Sake. Strong. The bartender, picking up on her dangerous vibe, produced the bottle and cup in an instant, and then moved away toward a less threatening woman. Snorting, Anko grabbed her purchase and walked over to an isolated table where she dropped into her seat and poured herself a drink. Honestly, the things she did for Konoha. Anko wasn't sure how long she sat there, watching and waiting, until she finally found her target. The target in this case was a boy with shaggy hair and dirty clothes, who hurried into the building and made a beeline for the bartender. Do you have any jobs for me, Hashiro-san? Yes, actually, Benrai-kun. I need you to run to Susan-sama for me and ask him nicely if he would mind paying his bill today. Finishing her sake quickly, Anko climbed to her feet and left, ducking into a side alley to await the boy's departure. Seconds later, grumbling and hurrying, Benrai came hustling out of the bar and started off down the streets. Anko moved to the rooftops and set off after him, being careful to remain unnoticed. You call that a punch? Naruto shouted, sidestepping the blow from the frustrated-looking boy and then ducked a kick from the other one. Come on, I thought you guys were ninja. It was an old tactic, one that Naruto had employed for years during his pranks, but that Anko had only recently named as the NANANANANA approach. Regardless of what it was called. Oi, anyone else feel a breeze? Naruto taunted once more, jumping this time to avoid a wild swing. Only this time the move backfired and he was caught in a surprise attack of kunai from one of the ninja. Both ninjas seemed to watch in satisfaction as Naruto came back into contact with the ground, as a now limp form surrounded by a pool of B. Then Naruto promptly went, poof. Both of course seemed disturbed by that turn of events, at least until they were sent crashing to the ground by a sharp blow to the back of the head. Guess it was just me, Naruto said, dusting his hands off before crouching down to riffle Thora the two unconscious ninjas' pockets, taking their money. It wasn't like they needed it, plus all this fighting was making him hungry. Standing upright he blinked, feeling yet another couple of clones go, poof, giving him the knowledge that as of now all the teams were neutralized. Grinning he chuckled, unable to believe that these stupid guys had all fallen for his challenges. Sweet Kami, only a total moron would actually walk up to each team and demand to fight them. Now, a team of Kage Bunshin with heavy usage of the Maisai was a different story. Shaking his head, Naruto stretched, looked up at the sky, then sighed. Well, now that he was done with the genin teams, he wasn't sure what to do. Shrugging, he walked to the edge of the wall and jumped to the ground, landing adroitly in the small alley created between the wall and buildings. Walking in a random direction, Naruto considered the unconscious genin and wondered at the ease with which he had won. Actually, in every encounter none of the genin had managed to even hit him, despite the fact that some of them were decently trained. It was almost like he was above them the same way that Anko was above him. Frowning, Naruto stopped in the middle of the alley and crossed his arms, considering that development. Well, if it was true then that meant he'd have no trouble with the Chunin exams that Hayate had told him about. It also meant he was that much closer to Hokage. Being this strong had its benefits. He was snapped out of his musing however by the sound of a footstep behind him. Spinning, Naruto avoided the first S of kunai easily enough and spared a moment on his opponent, who appeared to be a year older and sporting a scratched forehead protector. Then the boy attacked once more and Naruto avoided this one as well, but his stomach was knotting itself up, knowing without reason that this would have to end in B and death. Naruto didn't want to do it, he tried to think of some other way to end this, but he couldn't. On the next lunge, Naruto took a step forward while ducking to the right, while his arm swept back at an angle and drove the kunai into the side of the boy's T. Naruto expected to see a training dummy like last time. This time all he saw was the other boy's face twisted into an expression of surprise and terror. He watched with what felt like a mixture of professional interest and loathing as the bee splattered the wall behind the boy and the way the body slumped from the blow and weight. Pulling his kunai free with a sicking plop, he cleaned it, then returned it to his forearm holster before looking at the body at his feet. "Why didn't you just leave me alone?" Naruto muttered, Anko's words from the forest in Kusa rattling around in his head. A moment later it dawned on him that he didn't know what to do with the body. Anko had never prepared him for this type of situation. He couldn't just leave it there, even he knew the problems with that, and he didn't want to just hide it under some boxes. That would just be wrong. After several minutes of trying to figure out what to do, while dealing with his feelings and what Anko had told him, he decided on his course of action. It took only a minute to create 2 cage bunshin and another few to tell him to take the body out of the village and bury it. Then after they were gone, with the body in tow, he turned and headed to the streets of the village. He paused, looking around at all the people, felt the wind on his face and the sun on his en. It was odd, he had done exactly as Anko had taught him, had done the best thing he could for his mission, yet unlike Kusa he felt nowhere near the same amount of guilt. Like Anko had said, it was part of the job and it was shocking just how little effort it took for him to hide what he did feel behind his mask of carefree innocence. He had been forced to take yet another life, but so what? They were ninja, even Hokages. What now? Naruto mused, looking around in a careless way that would have done Anko proud. Then snapping his fingers, he thrust a finger into the air and proclaimed in a voice that he usually reserved for drawing attention and expressing excitement. "Ramen." That shouted he started off, a spring in his step and a smile stretched across his face. After all, when Naruto started a game of pretend, he never stopped. Anko moved quietly, with all of the stealth of the experta that she was. Which was a nice change of pace really. After spending so much time training Naruto, it was just nice to go back to what she was truly gifted at, her art. Even if she couldn't K Susan, she could maim him and, at the very least, she got to practice. Grinning, she landed noiselessly on the roof across from a 3-story building, and watched the boy she had been following hurry up the stairs to knock. Her grin slipped a notch, however, when nobody answered, and the boy began beating on the door, before letting out a loud curse and storming off. For some reason, the lack of activity filled her with a sense of dread. Jumping from her perch, she landed adroitly on the street and approached the door, then, checking to see if anyone was around, she used a kunai to pry the door open. Stepping inside the building, she hesitated, her finely tuned senses telling her that something was off in a bad way. Moving quietly, she checked the entire first floor, then, slipping up the stairs careful to not step on a board that looked as if it was about to creak, she checked the second floor. The rooms were clean, they even looked moderately lived in, but there was nobody around. Of course, the genin were busy, probably getting their kicked by Naruto, but still, there should have been someone to answer the door. Even Susan himself. Frowning, she moved toward the bottom of the second flight of stairs, only to pause. Kneeling, she reached out and touched the dark liquid she had noticed, assuring herself that it was, indeed, B. Her muscles tightened as she studied it, and then she looked up, straining her eyes to see the dim landing. Yes, there was a body up there, and from the angle it looked pretty bad. Hurrying up the stairs, she found that the body belonged to a boy, a year or so older than Naruto, whose tea had been eyes darting around the floor. She didn't find a hint of a fight, which meant this boy had been taken by surprise. Taking a moment to shut the now glassy eyes, she paused, studying his features. There was very little decay or smell. Plus, the bee was still wet, which meant this was a recent K. Susan. Anko hissed at the realization that, if this was what she thought, then he was probably S or S. Relying on her instincts, she darted for the far room and then skidded to a halt, biting back a curse. There was Susan, lying in a pool of his own bee. Anko quickly assessed the room, noting that there had been a brief fight, probably a last-second attempt on Susan's behalf. Entering the room, she knelt, frowning. Whoever had done this, knew she had been nearby and had purposely avoided a jutsu. This had been a professional job, thought out to the last little detail, which meant an Anbu who specialized in A. Which means, Unity is a whole lot more dangerous than we thought. You have no idea. Anko reacted instantly, spinning around toward the voice as a kunai fell into her hand. When she realized it was Kakashi, there was a moment in which she was about to K him anyway. After all, there was no conceivable way that he should have been there, but she realized that, if whoever had K Susan had wanted to K her, he would have just done it. Yo, the white-haired man said, giving a two-fingered salute even as he entered the room completely. How'd you get here? They don't call me a genius for nothing, the masked commander remarked, reaching into his hip pouch and tossing her the small pack he took out. You know what to do, right? Yeah, Anko grumbled, putting her weapon away. I still want to know how you got here. I used the Shunshin no Jutsu, how else? The man remarked casually as he leaned against the wall near the window. The Shunshin no Jutsu. Anko repeated in disbelief. You traveled almost 100 miles using that. Impossible. The Shunshin no Jutsu only works over a short distance. Ah, Kakashi said, raising a finger, his single eye closing in a happy curve. It depends on the amount of chakra you have at your disposal, as well as the distance and elevation. Since I have a large amount of chakra, and the elevation was level, all that really mattered was the distance. So, you used several shorter trips to cover the distance instead of just one long trip, which really would have been impossible. Anko said, then frowned. But doing that, you would have used up almost all of your chakra. Which is why I brought soldier pills. Ah, Anko smirked, turning to the body. You do know that if you take enough your balls will shrink, right? At the prolonged silence that greeted her statement, Anko chuckled, setting to work on the body. So did you see who got this bastard? No, Kakashi said, his tone hinting at annoyance. I arrived about 10 minutes ago, right around when Naruto picked his first fight. Ah, speaking of which, Kakashi responded casually, what exactly have you been teaching that boy? Why, did he scare you? Anko asked teasingly, busy fingerprinting the body for later identification. I ask because that's not a genin, Kakashi said blandly. That's a ninja being trained specifically for a heavy style. From the way my Sharingan kept losing track of him during the fights, my Seigakure no Jutsu, and I think he tried the Kanashibari no Jutsu. Guess the Shihohapo Shuriken and Futon, Daitopper were a bit much to use in the village, Anko muttered as she put the fingerprints away and began to place seals on the body for transportation. Did you get to see his mysterious grass jutsu? He won't let me see it at all. No, Kakashi said. How'd he learn a grass jutsu? The Shushi of Kusa gave him something that looked like a jutsu scroll. Anko explained with a shrug. Well, still, nothing you've taught him should be taught to a genin. He's got a knack for it, Anko explained, without really explaining, while turning to face the copycat ninja as she sealed the body into a scroll that she tossed to him. You never did tell me why you came all this way. Well, Kakashi leaned forward, eye alight with a unique seriousness. Confidentially, Anko, you never asked why I came all this way. Quote. Anko blinked, then her forehead. You've just been waiting to say that to someone, haven't you? Maybe, Kakashi admitted in amusement before turning serious. As for why I'm here, it concerns Unity and the Yondaim's legacy. The Yondaim's legacy, Anko repeated before blinking. What does that have to do with Unity? Wait, how exactly do you know even more about Unity? It's complicated, Kakashi said, crossing his arms. Basically I set a variation of the canary trap, and we stumbled across a Unity member. Who? Shidin, from the Tentujoho department. Kakashi explained darkly. Shidin, why am I not surprised? Anko said, climbing to her feet, almost unsurprised at the fact that the spy would be from the unit in Anbu that specialized in information. So, what, exactly, are they after, and how's it involve whatever this Yondaime legacy is? Their primary goal is to unite the country of Fire and Konoha under one banner, one ruler, the Hokage. Well, that's a give me. Anko remarked. True, but they're also targeting all relatives of current and former Hokages. Kakashi explained, I narrowing slightly. Shidin didn't know why or for what purpose, but somehow I doubt it's to give them sweets. Maybe to use the vast public and what little politic weight they carry. Anko suggested with a frown. After all, getting relatives of former Hokages to join behind your goal of unification would be a good idea. Possible, Kakashi admitted. It's also possible to control the Hokage by using them as hostages. The Sandaime would be unable to act against them if they were threatening his grandson, or one of the former Hokage's relatives. Yeah, Anko scowled before sighing. But you still haven't told me what the Yondaime's legacy is, or how it affects Unity, or why it brought you all the way out here. Quote. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kakashi version. The masked Jonin said, creating 6 Kage Bunshin before sending them out to secure the building and apply anti-spying seals. That finished, he cleared his tea and fixed her with a serious gaze. I'll tell you, but you cannot mention this. Ever. Not even to Naruto. Fine, fine, Anko waved a hand, serious though she was hiding it with nonchalance. What could be this important that the Anbu commander would go to this much trouble to secure an entire building? Also, why did he forbid her to tell this to Naruto? What could he have to do with what she was about here? The Yondaime Hokage had a relative, Kakashi said slowly, his voice tight. A son. Because of Unity and the unsecure nature of this building, the only way to refer to him was the Yondaime's legacy. Whoa, Anko said, realizing why he had been so anxious to get her and would seal the building so securely. This was major news and it was personal. The Yondaime had been important to the masked ninja. So, he's in the village. For the moment, Kakashi answered, crossing his arms and tilting his head. You do remember where they discovered the Yondaime, correct? Yeah, at Chernobyl Hospital, the one that was attacked after the Kyuubi. Anko paused, a frown marring her features as suddenly everything he had said and she knew connected at break-end speed. Wait, he was in nursery, and Naruto, but they couldn't. During the exam, Kyoshi-san ran the heredity test. Kakashi fixed her with an intense stare. We know Naruto's mother obviously had to have S at birth and the father was obviously in the battle against the Kyuubi. And the only logical reason the Yondaime was in the nursery was to see his son. Anko finished in a daze. Oh, that's what the Hokage said. Well, at least nobody knows, right? For the moment, Kakashi agreed. Hokage-sama will probably suppress the test until Naruto's been told, and I'm going to see if I can talk him out of revealing it until we can find Jiraiya or stop Unity. Anko nodded in understanding and then snapped her fingers, smirking as she remembered what had preempted the heredity test in the first place. So, was I right? Kakashi sighed in response and lowered his head, which Anko correctly took as admitting that she was right and Naruto did have a bloodline ability. I knew it. We should get back to Konoha. Not until you admit I was right. Anko said gleefully, then watched as he shook his head and pushed off the wall heading for the door. Pouting, Anko went after him, her voice excited. Say it, Kakashi, you bastard. Say that I was right. Here ya go Naruto. The blonde in question grinned, stacking his currently empty bowl in the second stack he had started. Bowing, he offered a thank you and dove into yet the next serving of the steamingly delicious ramen. True, while it was not Ichiraku ramen by any stretch of the imagination, it was still some pretty damn good stuff, and they had over 99 varieties. So far the first 75 had been great, and as he slurped his latest serving down he rounded that number up to 76. Looking up he grinned at the amused husband and wife, Tsubaki Toshiro and Amy, newlyweds who wanted 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, and saluted with his chopsticks. Oi, another winner. Ha ha, Toshiro said, his wife's cheek happily. You were right, dear. Of course, Amy said, grinning as she turned to the menu. So, let's see, we only have 23 more to go, so which one do you want to try next, Naruto-kun? Slurping the noodles up, he grinned at the woman deep in thought. I'm not sure how about. Why am I not surprised? A new voice suddenly said from the entrance. Naruto turned, eyes widening slightly as he spotted Anko and then Kakashi. Still he couldn't help but grin at the woman, she was after all sort of smirking. Anko. Yeah. Hey runt. The Jonin returned casually eyeing the 2 stacks of empty bowls. Yeesh. Did you eat everything on the menu? Not yet, Toshiro said happily from behind the counter. He's only got 23 more to go. Oi. Wait a minute. Naruto suddenly interjected, blinking as he looked at Kakashi once more. What's he doing here? His job, Anko said blandly, crossing her arms. So I take it you finished yours. Ha. Naruto blinked then grinned, slumping down his remaining noodles. Yeah, no biggie. Anko. I didn't know you had enough money to afford all this. Kakashi suddenly interjected as if finally noticing the bowls. Oi. I paid in advance. Naruto interjected, glaring at the man slightly. Shouldn't you be out reading a naughty book in public? Kakashi looked at him. Naruto looked back. Kakashi stared. Naruto shivered, feeling the intent radiating from the man. So, anyway ya runt, time to get a move on. Anko said as if she was perfectly oblivious to the feelings Kakashi was sending to Naruto. Or, do I gotta go? Naruto pleaded, his attention suddenly diverted away from his imminent death. Seeing her glare he sighed, turning back to the slightly disappointed looking couple. I gotta go guys, but, I'll be back to try those other 23 flavors. I promise. Amy smiled and leaned over his forehead fondly. We'll be here Naruto-kun. Toshiro nodded his agreement as Naruto finished his noodles and then joined Anko and Kakashi as they left the ramen stand. None of the ninja in question said a word, just walked almost as if they were a family of some sort, until they were beyond the walls of the village. Okay, so where'd you get the money for all that ramen? Anko asked curiously. He, those genin I beat up. Naruto answered brightly, figured it was the least they could do for me, 'cause I worked up an appetite you wouldn't believe. I know, I can remember this one time in Waterfall when I was still in the Anbu and I had to take out this missing nin and his groupies. Sweet Kami, I was starving by the time I was done and well they weren't using their money anytime soon, Anko said grinning. My captain said that was a bad habit though, at least until I bought him a book. Which she promptly destroyed. Kakashi S. Don't let her fool you Naruto, Anko has no sense of taste when it comes to literature. Naruto blinked, staring between the 2 older ninja and then frowned. It took a few minutes to put the conversation into context, but suddenly he realized that these 2 had known each other for a long time and that he could picture just what kind of book it had been. He was even preparing to make a joke until he realized that they were not heading for the captured genin. Oi, where are we going? Back to Konoha. The samurai can handle the genin, Kakashi answered with a pleasant upturning of his eye, unless you want to miss the Chunin exams, and risk having that Yamanaka girl castrate you. The more I hear about that girl the more I like her. Anko interjected with obvious amusement. Naruto however was just staring with wide-eyed horror at the concept of what he was now facing. It wasn't bad enough he had Anko trying to make him less than a man, but now apparently he had to worry about Ino wanting to do the same thing. That was honestly the last thing he needed, 2 Paishko girls. Relax, Naruto, she prefers verbally castration from what I hear. Unlike Anko, the white-haired man said in amusement. True, Anko grinned, looking at Kakashi and Naruto in that disturbingly pleasant way she had. Want me to demonstrate? Both men shook their heads, no. Rapidly, looking turfied. Anko just pouted. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.